Thank you very much for coming. Those who already came, we are still lacking a couple of people, but they will join us later. So let me start because we have very tough schedule. And well, first of all, for me, it's a great honor to be a moderator chair of this session on livable cities. And first of all, I would like to say that there are different concepts, well, at least 4 concepts that are now in practice: the sustainable city, intelligent city, ecological city, and livable city. And well, all of them are different and at the same time very, well, there is something in common, I would say. But today we're discussing livable cities, and that mainly means socially inclusive, affordable, accessible, healthy, and of course resilient to impacts of climate change, and so on and so on. So we have perfect examples of both cities and international networks, and I'm sure that today's discussion will be very fruitful and will give us a lot of food for thoughts. And I would like to start with the keynote speech, because hopefully, or thankfully and luckily, we have Professor Carlos Moreno with us. And he is, well, in a way, a guru of urban planning and inventing this 15-minute city concept. And I'm very happy that you were able to join us, and floor is yours. Please be free with your keynote speech.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to take part in this event. It's a great pleasure. Greetings from Paris. I want to share with you during 15 minutes my vision about this very popular concept, 15-minute city. In fact, I think that, do you have my screen for sharing a few slides? I am a professor at Sorbonne University, scientific director of the ETI chair at Sorbonne University. And we wanted to explain behind the 15-minute city concept. This is a very worldwide popular concept, but we wanted to share with you that this is a new vision for organizing differently the urban life. This is not a magic wand for transforming our city. This is a journey for proposing a new option for developing differently our urban life. In fact, today we have been living under 2 strong pressures. On the one hand, global warming. Global warming is today the relevant threats for humanity. Some years after the Paris Agreement, we need to continue in order to develop a low carbon city if we wanted to reach the policy of the 2050. And we have in the totally of our planet the second threat with the COVID-19. It's possible to switch off the micro, please. On the one hand, the global warming, on the other hand, COVID-19 pandemic crisis. We need, for that to propose a new urban lifestyle. We need to propose a new urban narrative. In fact, we need to define in what kind of city do we want to live in today. It is not possible today to continue to live in a unsustainable city. We need to break radically with the mineral city, with the mall, without humanity in city. It's not possible to continue to live in the poor condition for mass transportations. And the COVID-19 pandemic crisis is today a big opportunity for proposing another urban lifestyle based on the sustainable development. This is in reality the convergence in the ecological, economical, and social attitude for cities. For developing, for implementing the 50-minute city, we need in fact to propose a new urban policy with the local governance, the mayor or the president of metropolises, based on common good. The common good, this is the guarantee for, in reality, propose a new urban narrative if we wanted to swap the mindset, the urban mindset. We need to change our rhythm for living in cities. We needed to live differently with our mode of production or consumption. If we wanted to obtain, if we wanted to improve the quality of life of citizens, the way for a sustainable city is based on this proximity. With the 50-minute city, we wanted to rediscover the useful time. We wanted to propose a new way for taking our time. In reality, the modern urbanism after the Second War has been developing a urban lifestyle based on the very strong separation, the very important distances between my home, for example, to my work, and we needed today to propose a new paradigm. We wanted to propose this paradigm of proximity for health and livable cities. The scientific concept of a 50-minute city, in reality, we wanted to rediscover three different elements. The first one, chrono-urbanism, a new rhythm of the city. The second item, the chronotopia. We wanted to use differently more and more intensive manner the square meter, the thousands and thousands of square meters. The multi-purpose functions is the key for that. And the third point, this is the topophilia. The topophilia, this is that urban quality for developing new citizen urbanities, for loving our places, our streets, our boulevards. The 50-minute city for building this new proximity at the time of global warming and pandemic crisis is the convergence of the chrono-urbanism, the chronotopia, and the topophilia. We propose, in reality, a new urbanism human-oriented in cities. And at the heart, we have been developing this new urban ontology with a functional circularity. We have been identifying 6 key urban social functions in the high density cities with the access by low carbon mobilities, by walking or by cycling. And the 6 urban social functions are to live, to work, to supply, to care, to educate, and to enjoy. We consider that if we could provide access within a reduced perimeter for these six urban social functions with the functional mixity, we have the possibility to increase the new indicator for the well-being, my personal well-being, myself, my family, my sociability with my neighbor and my work colleagues, and with the planet, with the low carbon attitude and otherness. In the middle and low density, the concept is the 30 minutes territory, but the concept is the same concept. How could we develop, based on this new urban ontology, with the six urban social functions, a new livable, vibrant proximity? Our point of view is, in fact, to dedicate the best efforts for mixing the social functionality, for mixing infrastructures, for reusing square meters, for developing multi-purpose, for developing the one-point shop, for providing access in this proximity, not for developing a new rural hamlet, but to propose a polycentric city. This is a very important point. We want to develop the multi-center city, to spread, in fact, the services in the whole city for breaking with the segregative modern urbanism. We wanted to rebalance the geographic areas in cities. In the city of Paris, for example, we have in the west of Paris the corporate works, in the east the executive people that live, and in the north, in the east, the popular district. We need to develop a new mix of the social functions of people, of ages. We will need to take care of elderly people, of the fragile people. Our target is to propose a new journey during several years, because we don't have a magic wand for transforming in 1 week 70 years of the traditional urbanism, but we propose to reinvent this polycentric vicinity, to go towards this polycentric city for a new implementation of mobility. We prefer the soft mobilities to transform the districts for a peaceful street, for a greener city, because this is not an option today. A greener city and a livable city in a healthier city is today absolutely necessary. We need to go for a new kind of mobility, the chosen mobility and not the constrained mobility. For finishing, I think we are totally convinced in my research team and in the several cities which we have the possibility to work today, that the transformation of the work style is one today of the more relevant factors for transforming cities into city into 50-minute city. We have been living this new configuration in cities because the corporate towers today has become the ghost towers, and this is a new real possibility for proposing a new model for working. We call this new way the corporate working. similar to co-working for startups incubators, but this way, this is the decentralized work for fostering people to live and to work in the proximity with the virtual connections from the new corporate decentralized places, and to allow the possibility for people to reduce the time for commuting in cities. The corporate working today, this is very interesting way in Paris, in other cities, and we have the possibility, of course, to involve the private sector in this transformation. The common good, this is the guideline for the new urban policy based on the city of proximity. But the urban policy is not only the way for transforming our cities if we don't have a real strong support of the private sector. We need the private sector for transforming our economic model, in particular for working differently. I want to just for finishing with this picture, because we have been developing with my research team a new powerful tool in digital platform with this possibility for offering the great capabilities for exploring our territory in the proximity, 50 minutes by foot, by bike, because we have been discovering all kinds of resources in the proximity. We called that the hidden resources. In reality, we have a lot of resources in the proximity unused. And we have the possibility with the 15-minute to discover or rediscover these resources. One concrete example is in Paris, for example, the yard of the schools. The square meters are totally closed during the weekend. And for 1 month now, the schools are opened now for using this place for developing different activities. I want to just to put it in a nutshell, the concept. This is a new big opportunity for changing our lifestyles, our urban lifestyles radically, to retrieving peaceful streets, to going to greener and healthier or to have purpose locations in the square meters, and to transform each one of services in a multi-services. In the pandemic crisis, we needed to take care of elderly people, of fragile people, and we needed to spread the health services and the proximity. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you for your invitation.
Thank you very much, Professor Moreno, for your wonderful keynote speech. I have one immediate question, very important one. So your concept, in a way, means that a city, a big city, turns into a bunch of villages. So like small villages, 15 minutes, small cities inside big city. So in this case, the question is, how can we ensure that this 15-minute city will not multiply disparity? So it can be a 15-minute city for rich, with best schools and best shops and best everything, infrastructure, and also 15 minutes city for well, outcasts. How can we ensure that it works to fight disparity?
Yeah, this is a very good question. In fact, the concept is, on the one hand, 15-minute city in a higher density areas. This is the case of the Paris inside. And we consider that for the great areas, for the big metropolises. we have the possibility to extend this concept in the way of polycentric metropolises. For example, in Paris, we have the city of Paris and we have the Greater Paris. We have today the project of the railway Greater Paris with a new 5 railway lines and 65 new railway stations. With the 15-minute city concept or with the 30 minutes territory, you have the possibility to propose a polycentric way for mixing in each one of district, in each one of areas, in each one of proximities, this new paradigm. In reality, regardless of the size of the city, metropolises or a small city, we have today the possibility to define a new urban policy. I wanted to insist that for the new urban policy, we need to propose a roadmap based on the common good. The common good is the possibility to offer the services for optimizing the uses of square meters for multimodal transportation, for health services, for proposing square meters without speculative business in real estate. In the case of the city of Paris, for example, we have been creating 2 different real estate, a commercial property only for renting square meters dedicated to implant the shops in the proximity, in the ground zero of a building. And we have the real estate of the city of Paris for proposing the price of the square meters for housing based on a local regulation. I think that the word regulation is very important for local governance in order to avoid that this concept will become a new way for a gentrification and for a new segregation. We need to propose with the 50-minute concept or the 30-minute territory a polycentric city for all and not for one elite of citizen dwellers.
Thank you very much. And well, I would like to present other speakers and panelists for today's session. We will switch to them one by one, and then we will have discussion. So, gentlemen, I apologize if I spell your names in the wrong way. I tried to Google all of them. So, well, let's try. So we start with Nigel Jolens. From Associate Director of European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And we have Pekka Timonen, who is the Mayor of City of Lahti, current European Green Capital 2021. And we have Mr. Agnes Tjarks from City of Hamburg, Senator for Transport. And Hamburg is twin city of St. Petersburg, which we are very proud of. And we have Suizin Zhuo from Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences, and we have Rüdiger Arendt from OECD. So I propose, well, sorry, we have limited time, so I will play Ivan the Terrible, very terrible person, and will limit you as much as possible, but one by one, please have a floor, and the first floor for 6-7 minutes comes for Nigel Jolens, please, floor is yours.
Dimitri, thank you very much. Can you just confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today. And thanks to Carlos for your inspirational talk. What I'd like to do is, because I work for a bank, I'd like to shift the narrative from the normative narrative to a more positive analysis, looking at what I see actually happening on the ground in cities today. I'll focus a little bit on the COVID impact that we're seeing in the cities, what the bank, the EBRD, is doing, as well as other international financial institutions, in responding to some of those challenges to help continue to make our cities livable and to improve the livability of those cities. And I'd like to also just finish off with giving some observations on seeing how cities are changing the way they are doing things. Carlos mentioned I like the corporate tower to ghost tower. So I've got some observations there from, as I say, a kind of positive analysis of what's happening. So obviously, COVID-19 has had an enormous impact. We know about 90% of the cases in the world have been in cities. And from a banking point of view, we're expecting the cities that we work with to lose between 15 and 25% of local revenues in 2021. And that's because basically we're seeing shifting demand patterns with increased costs and decrease in the revenue coming into the cities. This is most prominent in transport and solid waste, but we're also seeing it in water and the heating sectors as well. Now, apart from the budgetary impact, we know that there are also other huge impacts, unemployment, health, disrupted global supply chains, and shifts in the way that people are working and so on. So I guess the question is, how is the bank, EBRD, and other IFIs responding to this? Now, for those of you who don't know, the EBRD is a multilateral development bank. We're owned by 69 countries, and we work across Central Europe through to Eastern Europe, to Central Asia, and through the Balkans into North Africa. And we've been working on cities' responses to COVID in two ways. The first is through what we call our recovery package, and the second through our program called Green Cities. And I'll just give a brief indication of how we're doing that under each one. So under our rescue package, we have this thing called the Vital Infrastructure Support Program. We were the first international financial institution to approve this package on the 13th of March, actually, 2020. So very early on. It focuses on ensuring provision of services. So it's essentially providing working capital, finance, and stabilization facilities for key infrastructure providers. So far, to date, we've provided nearly €1 billion to cities to keep the cities moving, to keep financing those vital pieces of infrastructure that are needed for public services. The other area that we use to support cities in the COVID response is through a program called EBRD Green Cities, and you can see it here on my banner. This is part of the long history of the EBRD's work in cities. In fact, since 1994, we've been working with cities, financed over €7 billion of municipal services in 220 cities or more. Our current program, EBRD Green Cities, is a €2.5 billion framework, and we have currently 45 cities as members of this program. And core to this program is this linking of strategic planning, what we call a Green City Action Plan, to the investment pipeline. Now, just to give you a rough estimate of scale, so we've financed about 41 projects, roughly €800 million through 17 cities. And this Green City Action Plan was developed in 2016, obviously before the COVID crisis. So what we've done in response to COVID is we are changing the method that we're using to do the strategic planning in cities, and we've included a much stronger focus on risk and vulnerability assessment, which considers not only climate change and other risks, but also risks like pandemics. And that is helping cities to consider how they are responding and how they can plan to respond to current and future crises. Okay, and I'll just finish off my last couple of minutes here on giving you an indication on how I see cities changing as a result of this COVID-19 crisis. So despite the ravages of COVID-19, we're still seeing that cities are proceeding with infrastructure projects, possibly because there is a lag between the development and the finance. However, we've still seen cities proceeding with finance, and in particular, we've noticed that cities are becoming increasingly interested in green infrastructure investments. So last year, I think it was the 31st of December, we actually signed an investment for electric buses in Amman, Jordan. We're seeing increased uptake of renewables being integrated into investments. And interestingly enough, increased interest in nature-based solutions in these infrastructure investments. I would say there's also a change possibly brought about by COVID in that with people working together, they're less siloed in their approaches to investments. So we're seeing cities looking at investments from a more systematic approach rather than just from individual utility or service provision. Okay, that's the first thing. The final point I'll make is I've noticed the way that city governance and stakeholder engagement is conducted has actually moved and changed because of this online communication approach. For example, in the city governance, I've attended online council meetings where they're making significant decisions about investments or strategic direction, which have been conducted by Zoom and so on. We've also conducted a number of citizen engagement exercises, all online, and they seem to be relatively effective. And final point, this online approach has led us to conduct a number of webinars, and in the last 6 months we've had 6 webinars with about 1,500 people attending. So in summary, EBRD have noticed a huge impact with the COVID-19 pandemic. The bank has responded to that in 2 ways, through our rescue package and through our EBRD Green Cities. And we've seen that investment decisions have still maintained despite the ravages of COVID on city revenue. So Dimitri, thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. And let us go to one of the greenest cities of Europe so far, to Lahti. And Pekka, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dimitri, and hello to everyone, and welcome to city of Lahti in southern Finland. You can see the beautiful winter day behind me today. Lahti is a city of 120,000 people, and a center of the urban region is 200,000 people. So Lahti is a very average European city. Most of the Europeans live in the cities like Lahti, and that's one of the key points here in the beginning. So what Lahti and cities like Lahti do is a very crucial and critical for Europe, because so-called mid-sized cities are the crucial for the transformation. And if you allow me, I will show you just a few slides. Let's see how this works. So Dimitri, if you allow me, so I will show you a few slides so you can get to that. So let's go here. And here we go. And And I don't know whether you see it
Yes.
now. Good. So my point is that sustainable cities are better cities, and this is already, like Carlos Moreno said, that in a way of improving the city life and also reaching the sustainability targets, we must create better cities, better for social and economic, so better cities for everyone, and also as a business environment. Lahti, as you know, is the European Green Capital this year. Only one city in Europe is selected every year as the European Green Capital, and it's a competition by the European Commission. And you can see the 12 different indicators that the expert commissions are evaluating when the city is chosen as the European Green Capital. And you can see that actually the quality of life and the livable cities is very much, of course, linked to the sustainable and environmental goals of the city. Better air, better water, less noise, air quality. Kind of a 15-minute city is also, Carlos, probably a much more sustainable city too, and it must be so. But anyway, so Lahti is so we are kind of the flag carrier of the sustainable cities in Europe and moving forward. But basically saying my point, sustainable cities are and must be better cities in order to motivate people to move forward, but also having a very holistic approach to the climate and environmental issues. Just show you what we in Lahti have been able to do, and we are not the most resourceful city. Lahti is an industrial city, making a transformation now from the old industry background to a modern environmental city, and a very new university city, and etc. So if we can do this, most of the cities can. We have already cut our emissions by 70%, and we will be carbon neutral by 2025. That's tomorrow, dear listeners. We have been able to reach several energy consumption goals. Our district heating production, we said yes, 2019, we said goodbye to coal and all fossil fuels. So energy transformation has done by the city and investing a lot of money, also using European funding for the energy switch. And also utilization of waste, circular economy, but also how we do our waste management. We don't have a landfill anymore. It's gone, it's history. Only 1% of our municipal waste is not utilized or recycled. So by 2050, we are aiming to close our system, so no waste city is also possible. So just telling you that how cities, making a livable city and making more sustainable, they go hand in hand. And yes, you can do results. The most important thing is to start now. The earlier you start, the further you get. And Lahti has a very long tradition already on ambitious environmental goals. Our climate program was accepted in 2009. But also changing the urban mobility, as already said here. It's not only about from cars to electric buses. We have a large share of our public transformation will be this year transformed into the electric systems, electric buses, air quality, phosphorus, conservation areas, kind of a holistic view on how a modern sustainable city is created and how you improve the quality of life in the city by having these multiple ambitious goals. And as said, our target is to be carbon neutral, and we are already long in our journey, but again, also the carbon neutral city must be a better city for citizens, businesses, everyone. So we cannot reach that if we are not engaging the community to our goals. And we have actually used very different methods to engage the community, and that's very important. How you engage a livable city, in my thinking, is a city where the citizens are actively engaged and participating into city development. So, for example, we have used different tools. We have the world's first carbon neutral symphony orchestra, and we have the world's first professional ice hockey team, which is carbon neutral, one of the world's first professional sports teams, because they communicate to different people and they engage different people. They are possible to, if a mayor, allow me to say, says something, people say, yeah, that's the mayor talking. But when the local sports and other artist heroes are saying this is what we do, they reach different audiences. So this year we are concentrating on 4 themes as a kind of a city example here in this seminar. We are working in a theme of carbon neutral life. We are working with the citizen participation because without it, it's very difficult to reach the goals. Circular economy and larger sustainable business being the center for sustainable business, not only in Finland, but internationally. And then nature and water and air. So biodiversity, which is now a growing subject in urban development. So all in all, I hope you find our programs inspiring, and also understanding that the Lahti is this kind of an example of the city where the majority of the Europeans live in, mid-sized cities, from 100,000 to 300,000 people. So as a mayor, my message is also, you cannot be a livable city if you are not sustainable. And you cannot be a city that is not sustainable is not smart. So you cannot be smart if you are not sustainable. So sustainability and sustainable urban development is now in the core of everything we do, making our city and other cities livable. And that's also our role and responsibility as the European Green Capital this year. So I hope you found this interesting, and maybe in a context what already earlier was said by 2 speakers before me, putting this in a kind of a city angle into this framework. So Dimitri, thank you. This is what I have in mind today.
A good example of how things can be done. Applause to Lahti and to you and your team. Thank you. And now we are going to our twin city, free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg. And Senator Tjax, please, floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dimitri, and a warm welcome from Hamburg as well to our sister city, St. Petersburg. Thank you for the inspiring presentations from Lahti, Mr. Mayor, and also from Paris. I think Hamburg is somewhat a city in between. We are having about roughly 2 million people. And as you might all know, Germany is a car manufacturing and a car loving country. And I'm here to present you some ideas from the traffic because I'm Germany's first minister for traffic or mobility transition. So in our car country, we're now trying to transfer Hamburg into a city which is, in traffic terms, a more livable, greener city. And it's very inspiring to hear that many other European cities and also the European Commission as well is going this way, because I think we need pressure on all political levels in this respect to win the case. And therefore, as Carlos maybe more pointed out, strategies on city development, I will focus myself more on the traffic itself. And I think I want to outline to you 4 strategies we try to follow to transfer Hamburg in the public space in this respect. The first strategy is is not much talked about, but I think it is very important. It became even more clearer in the pandemic, and it's also not parts of the DNA of my city, because my city is Germany's largest port and a city that is found on trade and traffic. But I think one of the most important respects and strategies is to minimize traffic at all. And I think this is something Carlos talked about in a 15-minute city, but I think we also see this in terms of the pandemic, that we have now all cities across Europe that we can see that traffic is minimized. Air traffic is minimized by 80 to 90%. Unfortunately, also public transport is minimized in my city at the moment, up to 50%. Car traffic is minimized over the year by -10%, and only bike traffic is rose by 33% in the last year in Hamburg. And so it's an overall strategy to minimize traffic. And even though we have more inhabitants within our city, we need to minimize traffic overall. And I think the pandemic tells us that it works, and digitalization and also city planning, city development are the key aspects in this respect to help us work. The second part is, of course, we need to emphasize in public transport. Here, overall, again, I think we are somewhat between Paris and Lahti. In Hamburg, we're trying to emphasize first of all, to develop a carbon neutral public transport. We want to be there in 2030. And therefore also Nigel talked about the funding. We're trying to put up a bond, a green bond on the market, about €500 million to finance this strategy. So in 2030, we want to transform all 2,100 buses, for example, we have into electric buses and transform the ships, etc. At the same time, we need to build up public transport because we need to have more ways within public transport to meet our climate goals. And even though I'm a convinced cyclist, I know that at least for Hamburg, I can tell you that reaching our climate goals, we need public transport even a bit more than just cycling. Whether cycling is like the emotional heart of mobility transition, public transport is the backbone for meeting our climate goals. And therefore, we're also trying to create new subway lines, new train lines. Overall, we're trying to build 36 new stations within the next 20 years and to give 500,000 people a new way of taking trains within Hamburg. At the same time, what we can see across Europe, I think, is, of course, cities trying to get better in cycling, and many people look to the Netherlands, look to Denmark, how to enhance their cycling ways. We do too. However, most of the times cities are either good in cycling or they are good in public transport, and it's not so easy to find a city which is good in public transport and in cycling at the same time, because there are also conflicts, for example, between buses and cyclists, and we are trying to develop both of these systems at the same time. We'll have some problems with this, to tell you the truth, but in the end, I think we're trying to move forward on both areas. For example, we created 62 kilometers of new cycling ways last year, and this year will be even better. The fourth outline I want to give you is, I think we need to work with the digitalization also in the public transport especially, but also with cycling and cars. Within digitalization, the European train control system allows us to put a lot more trains on the same infrastructure we already have, and it is much quicker to enhance these systems. You can do this within 5 to 10 years than building new subways or new train lines, and therefore digitalization in the train sector, also for bikes, concerning traffic lights, for example, but also to bring public transport in the outer skirts of your own city by on-demand mobility systems we're trying to develop within the ITS World Congress next year or this year in Hamburg. We're trying to use digital approaches to enhance mobility. And last but not least, to come back to the origin, livable and green city. I think in Hamburg we would always say, maybe other cities would say this too, at least for Germany, we're the greenest cities, and concerning especially trees along the roads. And this always has been traditionally a big topic in our city. And the question is how we can develop streets towards blue-green infrastructure. And there are many things about this, planting the trees at all in the beginning, finding the places, giving them the place, but also trying to to clean the water with the blue-green infrastructure from the streets, and at the same time also try to capture the water for the heating periods in summer, which we already also experienced in Hamburg the last summer and the 2 years before, so that the trees can still grow and live within these periods and spend shade for the people and pedestrians. And therefore also this development of a blue-green infrastructure, I think, is the fourth outline. So to sum up, first of all, minimize traffic overall, then enhance public transport, make it green, enhance cycling, try to find digital solutions, and plan with blue-green infrastructure. Those are my 5 key topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring example. St. Petersburg is, well, in a way bigger than Paris, and we are looking for, well, Lahti case is very good, but Lahti is bit smaller than St. Petersburg, and we are thinking like, well, maybe we need other examples too, but combining different approaches at the same time is wise strategy, I think. So thank you very much. And now we are going to the other part of the world, also to the partner city of St. Petersburg, to Shanghai, and Professor Suizin Zhuo from Shanghai Academy of Social Sciences. Please, floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me? Hi.
Yes.
Oh, okay. This is Suizin Zhuo from Shanghai. I'm afraid I'm talking about the issue based on my observation in Shanghai. You know, we have different situation. I think in Shanghai, in China, there's a trend of further concentration of population and economic activities in a few metropolitan areas and the city clusters. So in Shanghai, I think the population in Shanghai have been increasing. Today we have more than 24 million people in Shanghai, and I think many migrants young people intend to migrate to Shanghai too. So one of the debates in the government policy is whether we should favor the growth of big cities or we should favor the growth of small and medium-sized cities. I think today the official policy is to contain the growth of big cities, like the in-migration to cities. There are some policies to contain the in-migration to cities. But the problem is whether we should give higher priority to the development of small and medium size, or should we give the higher priority to the development of big cities? I think the breakout of the COVID-19 pandemic seemingly provides some empirical evidence that to the argument that the high population density in the large cities would increase the risk of infecting the disease, communicable disease. Indeed, the early spreading of the COVID-19 concentrates in Wuhan city, a large city in China with over 10 million population. But recently, however, there are some concentration of infection cases taking place in rural villages in northern part of China, indicating that population density is not the decisive factor affecting the morbidity. As compared with cities, although countryside has lower population density, on the other hand, there are fewer healthcare facilities and services. And even in the countryside with low population density, there are also events of massive gathering of population in the countryside, such as celebration of traditional holidays, weddings, and the funerals. In some, there are some events. Once there are a few unknown patients participated in these events, the risk would not be detected before the infection becoming widespreading and severe. So in the perspective, on the other hand, in the perspective of international comparison, I think the disease has been better controlled in East Asian countries with higher population density as compared with the European and the American countries with relatively lower density. So one of the China's strategies to contain the spreading of the disease is to make every effort to prevent the community infection. So it seems that the high costs are involved in this strategy because you have to take some very severe measures. However, with the prevention of the spreading of the disease in the communities, it can save the overall cost and the better control of the disease. Based on the changes in the spatial distribution of the population, the future trend will be further concentration of the population in some central cities, the metropolitan areas and the related city clusters. I'm talking about the situation in China and probably in Japan and Korea too, but it may not be relevant to European countries, I'm sorry. But in China, we see the trend of concentration. Of course, such concentration in megacities like Shanghai would lead to some problems like traffic congestion, high prices of housing, etc., and imposing negative impacts on the residents, especially those low-income residents in the cities. So to make the megacities more livable, we should avoid building single center cities like Beijing, okay, by planning and building multi-center cities. Recently, Shanghai municipality is paying more attention to the development of 5 suburban second-tier cities in the metropolitan. So we have 5 suburban second-tier cities in Shanghai metropolitan. So it's important to create more employment opportunities in these 5 suburban cities so that more residents can work and reside in those cities to reduce the commuting between the central and the suburban cities. So many young people now are working in the central part of the municipality and they live in the suburban part of the city because the housing price there, the rent there is cheaper. So, but that creates a lot of commuting traffic. In addition, Shanghai municipality should pay more attention to the development of Shanghai metropolitan, consisting of Shanghai municipality and the surrounding areas, including surrounding cities, so that people can share the work and the housing space cross the boundary of different administrative units. So I think I'm afraid that the focus of my talk are rather different from the previous speakers. But I would like to say this is my talk is based on my observation in Shanghai and China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Very interesting experience. And what I already said, this is the case of a huge city, which is even more developing and more growing and needs more improvements And well, in planning of improvement of the city that is still developing, from one point of view, is a challenge and opportunity. So, well, good luck in turning Shanghai into more comfortable place and a livable city. And we have the last but not the least speaker, Rüdiger Arendt from OECD. So please, floor is yours.
Okay, thanks for inviting me. I'm trying to put in some slides. Hope that works.
Sure.
Can you see slides?
Not yet.
Okay, I think it's coming. Okay, I think it's working now, right?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, great. So basically, I thought that, after the obviously the brilliant exposition of Carlos about the concept of the 15-minute city, and then the extremely interesting presentations, both from the IBAD, but also especially from the mayors and the representative of the other cities, I wouldn't have much to say on these issues. So I thought I'd try to go maybe to bring something new to the discussion, to a more data-based approach and trying to compare cities. The idea being is kind of like, when you're having data and you want to achieve to being a livable city, and you can kind of like compare where you are compared to other cities. That can actually help you to see where the areas are, where there's scope for improvement. And in that sense, we came out very recently with a report which we call Cities in the World. And what the peculiarity of this report is that we've been redefining cities in a way. We've been measuring cities in a way so that they're comparable, because with traditional city comparison, it very much depends on which geography you're looking at. Give an example. For example, Paris is a relatively small part of the Paris agglomeration, whereas the city of Rome is basically encompasses everything in the Rome agglomeration. So if you compare these two cities, you're comparing kind of like 20% of one agglomeration with everything in the other agglomeration, and that obviously gives you very biased results when you look at income levels, when you're looking at transport, public transport effectiveness, and so on and so forth. So we're having this work done. So we have comparable cities across the world, and we've been started to also kind of like come up with data for all these cities, and I'll just present you some examples of indicators which are linked to the concept of a livable city, basically. So the first thing I wanted to remind you is basically that actually in everything we may be saying about problems in cities, cities are still the place where people are having the highest level of well-being, and that's also reflected by the fact that generally speaking, we still have very high levels of urbanization in most countries on this globe. Maybe at the moment, well-being in cities may be a bit more impacted during the COVID situation, but when we go back to a more normal life, you can see here that, compared to towns and semi-dense areas or rural areas, people very clearly have a higher self-declared well-being in cities. When you break that down a bit, then you see that, in addition to income levels, which obviously increase with city size, that's well known, you have better access to, better digital access in cities. You have better health outcomes in cities, which depends both on healthier lifestyles, but also on kind of like, better health systems in large agglomerations. But you also have negative effects in cities, obviously. You have problems with air quality, and you have, also levels of insecurity in cities that are much higher than, for example, in rural areas. Just to give you an idea, basically, I have a map with basically, all the cities in the world with more than 50,000 inhabitants. And what you're looking for is the dark green dots, because that's basically showing that your air quality is in line with what the World Health Organization is recommending. Already, if you're like a light green, you're already above those standards. And then when you're getting into yellow and red, you're getting to levels where you're really imposing your population to very serious health risks. And obviously, there's a lot of people dying, which is caused by air pollution each year, and that also is reflected in that slide. And that obviously, if you're the light green, obviously that's already an issue for livability. But if you're yellow or red, you're having a big issue of livability with respect to air pollution. So that obviously is an area where there's an important need of improvement. And Now it depends obviously on what kind of city you're living in, but at least in the European cities, the major pollution, I mean, that we're seeing is typically coming from the cars who are driving in the cities. It's to some degree also from agriculture around, but I mean, the biggest polluters are still the cars. So I mean, the relatively obvious solution is that we need to get rid of cars which are polluting the environment in cities. So I mean, we need to move to electric cars or other cars that are polluting. And then another co-benefit of that can be if we're getting rid of cars altogether, and that was already mentioned before, then we can also use this space to, I mean, provide public space that people can use in other ways. I'll give you an example. During the COVID crisis, I mean, the city of Paris, I mean, has been transforming a lot of parking spaces in the cities, and you need to know that, you know, I mean, most cars in cities, I mean, they are being parked more than 90% of the time. So I mean, they're basically taking up a lot of space for not being very useful, to be honest. So I mean, they transform the parking spaces into areas where restaurants and bars could out tables and chairs. And I mean, this was, I can tell you, because I mean, I'm living in Paris, this was a tremendous improvement in the livability of Paris, where in summertime, people had real problems just being outside and getting some food or drink, because I mean, all the places were so crowded. And this by itself was maybe the most important improvement of livability in Paris that has been happening over the last years. I mean, there's a lot of other improvements as well, but I mean, this really made a difference. And that has several aspects, because I mean, that also means that people feel less the need to kind of like drive away each weekend out of Paris, which then obviously kind of like is creating additional traffic jams and additional pollution, and also kind of like from an carbon transition point of view is not very helpful, basically. So I mean, I'm just trying to say basically getting space back from cars for the citizens of the city, and also making sure that, I mean, polluting cars are no longer circulating cities can go a long way to increasing well-being. Obviously, it's not the only point, but it's a very important one. Then I sometimes hear the argument from people, because I mean, there's these beds in big cities that I was talking about, then why don't we kind of like, you know, make sure that people move out of the big cities and they move to the mid-sized cities? Let's make mid-sized cities more attractive, and that will solve the problem. Now, making mid-sized cities more attractive is a very good idea. I'm totally for that. I mean, it helps with regional development, has a lot of benefits. That's all fine. But I mean, why do we want to kind of like cause, I mean, huge transfers of population rather than trying to fix the problems we have in the big cities by making them more livable? So I mean, that's the answer I would give to this argument. And I already kind of like, I mean, talked about, I mean, some ways of kind of like replacing cars in big cities. Then obviously, I mean, we need to move to more active transport. I mean, as Carlos already mentioned, we also kind of like need to make better use of the e-rollers. For example, in Paris, I mean, we have parking spaces now, so that's good, but we don't have enough of them. So I mean, that would be useful to have some more, at least in certain parts of the city. And more generally speaking, I would just need to make our cities much more greener. And I mean, and Pekka was mentioning, you know, that I mean, Lahti is the green city of Europe, and that is really very inspiring. And in places like Paris, I mean, there really is a need for having, I mean, more green everywhere. And that's firstly for just the well-being of people seeing green, having shade in the summer, but that's also against, you know, when you're having climate change and hotter summers, it's very important also against heat island effects to have more green in the cities. In that respect, for example, in Paris, I'm trying to get the roofs of Paris, the zinc roofs, as kind of like a you know, international heritage from the UNESCO. Is maybe not that useful. It's maybe better to transform these places from a livability perspective into gardens and terraces. I think that would have a lot more. And then another important aspect of livability, and that's something overlooked, is also kind of like resilience, and kind of like, I mean, basically that, I mean, disasters don't strike, or they don't strike very often, or when they strike, I mean, basically cities are prepared for that. And I just wanted to show you that slide. And that's actually a bit scary. I mean, what that slide shows you is the percentage of population which is underwater when the flood strikes. So basically, when you're in a bluish territory, that means basically more than half of your people are underwater when there's a flood. Now here we're talking about 100-year floods. But the problem is, I mean, 100-year floods are not 100-year floods anymore. With global warming, 100-year floods will happen regularly. I don't know, every 10, 20 years, I don't know exactly. But I mean, there'll be very common features. So basically, I mean, all the places where you're kind of like seeing blue, I mean, they very regularly will have very large parts of the city underwater, and this will not help with livability, obviously. And that will also kind of like cause very huge human disasters if there's no adequate measures taken against that. And that's both on the, I mean, adaptation side, these cities need to, find ways how to deal with these floods, but also on the climate mitigation side, we definitely need to achieve the climate, carbon targets. If we don't, then this situation is going to be, as you're seeing here, but on a very regular and very frequent basis. Then, we have been talking about mobility, and obviously public transport is very important for the livability of a city. I was already kind of like talking that, we need to gain space from cars, basically, especially in the bigger, more denser cities. And then, people obviously need to get from one place to another. So what's important is that they can use a well-performing public transport system. And I got just two indicators of that. So here I have a little table where basically we're looking at metros, and what you see, for example, is the Paris metro is a metro which has a really large number of stops, and people are living close to the metro stops. St. Petersburg stands out. It's one of the most used metro system per inhabitant that we have in our sample here. So I just wanted to show you. Obviously you don't have the time to look in detail, but you can find all this information in the report I mentioned, and I'll put a link to that in the chat afterwards. So if you're interested, you can look in more detail. And I also wanted to show this slide. It's a bit complicated, but I think it's important, and so I'll try to explain it. So basically, when you're trying to assess the performance of public transport, and what we tend to do, we're kind of like trying to look at, how many people can you access with public transport around you in a certain time. Now, that's a bit problematic because there are some cities where the population density is much higher. So basically, when you can go 5 kilometers, you're reaching a lot more people than another city, which is a bit less dense, basically more spread out. And so we are trying to kind of like combine the density and in how the transport system works. If we're looking basically, what is the share of the accessible population with respect to the nearby population, and that's what the black dots are. So basically, the black dots kind of like give you a proxy for the efficiency of the transport system as such. And what you see is London is doing really well on that matrix. Paris is doing quite well. Petersburg is doing okay. A lot of US cities are not doing very well. But you can also look at the details in that. So that's just another benchmarking tool. You can be looking at and kind of like comparing on this specific measure how your city is basically performing. Then basically I didn't want to stop before saying that public transport obviously is very important, but what's even more important is access. Access is basically kind of like, that people can get to the places that they need to get to easily and quickly. And that's in a way very close to the 50-minute city concept that Carlos has been explaining. We in the city call it access, but it basically also means that if we're talking about trying to improve, the situation with respect to transport, we're not just talking about means of transport, but we're also talking where we are placing the different amenities in the city and how we are organizing our urban planning. And that is really important to understanding that there's a very close link between urban planning and transport, and that's the only way or the best way how we can solve the problem and basically get to cities that are livable for everybody. And that's what I wanted to say. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much. Very good statistics, very good overview of what's going on. And seeing St. Petersburg in the flood zone, yes, we live in St. Petersburg and we know how water is coming every now and then. Well, we have very little time to talk, but I have one big question to all of you. We were talking a lot about mobility today, and to make cities more walkable and bikeable, we need to fight with cars in a way, as we call it, primacy of the car, right? So, how can we fight with the primacy of the car if the car is still a symbol of, not of status, but of success? So people need car because it's a symbol of success. Well, clever people travel by underground because underground is faster and simpler, sometimes even cheaper. But so many people still need a car because to show that they are, successful in their careers. And the second thing is that in countries, especially in the north, like Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, the park of cars, the private cars are very old. very often diesel fueled, and nobody is going to invest in this anyhow. And the third point is of course climate. I mean, I would love to ride a bicycle, but when you have 2 meters of snow on the street, that's not very feasible. And then, of course, distances. I mean, cities like Paris and St. Petersburg and London. I mean, you can't cross the city by bicycle. I mean, 3 hours is not the thing I really want to cycle. So, a question to all the panelists: how to ensure that we will beat cars once. Microphone.
Sorry. I could comment as city of Paris about cars in city. The mayor of Paris is very, very clear about it. We need to reach the carbon neutrality at least at the horizon 2050. And Rudiger was very pedagogical with the map about fine particles with pollution. We need, in fact, to ban diesel cars in cities. It's just not possible to continue to have in the center of cities diesel cars. We have been radical way in order to reconquer public spaces, in order to propose bike lanes, in order to propose walkability and public transportation for that. One of the problems in cities is not only the car, because when the car they don't have the movement, the place for the parking is public used. In the city of Paris, have decided to reconquer the totality of 60,000 parking box in the surface for proposing other different uses. In this pandemic crisis, this is parking places in the surface. We have been decided to transform it into outside restaurants, bar, cafe, etc. I think that if we wanted to have a livable city and in a healthy city, the car is not possible to, it's not compliant with this way. For people who live in the outskirts, in the suburbs, it is possible to take a car only for the first and closer point for using public transportation. This is a question of principles if we wanted to transform our cities in low carbon cities.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Pekka?
Well, this is a good question. First of all, of course, all traffic is a system. So different methods of traffic must make a system that works. So it's not only that car against bicycle. It's more about how we encourage and make possible people to make good choices and make this understanding that this is what's the best way of move around. And Lahti is a hilly winter city. So for example, right now we are building new bicycle routes and also some routes that we keep in a good condition also during the winter, that you can also bike during the winters. But the other thing is that you can use other methods too. We in Lahti are, as the world's first city, now experimenting with the local carbon trade. So you have an app in your mobile phone which measures how you move around. And when you are using a low carbon method and changing your behavior, it gives you credits. And with these credits, you can go to movie, to theater, you can get free bus tickets. So also it's a question of impacting people's choices and behaviors. So of course, in the big picture, there are things that we are also sure that we can encourage people by using modern technology and digital tools to make them understand that the choices, what they do, are for the good and they benefit from it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anis.
Well, I think I just can add some things because I think the other speakers already pointed out some stuff. I think it is, first of all, it is a system. You need alternatives. You need to make sure that people can commute in a city. Public transport, bikes are the nearest options. I also think we need to talk about costs. You have to make going by car more expensive, and at the same time you need to have political leadership that tries to transform a city, because obviously there's always people who want to go into a different direction, and it is the art of politics well to put together the different parties in a community to go into the same direction, because all in all, traffic is much about infrastructure, and infrastructure are usually programs that need to last 5 to 10 to 15 years to really change something. And therefore you need to ensure that the political majority works on these infrastructural projects 15 years. And since the time span from election to election is usually 4 or 5 years, you need to ensure that it needs to survive the election, the strategy, and then you'll get the impact.
Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, yes, Rüdiger, then you will have the last speech.
I just wanted to say something about the car as a status symbol. I mean, that's certainly still the case in certain countries, in certain areas, but that's how should I say, that's maybe cultural heritage. I mean, and with the younger generation, I think that's fading away, because for them, cars are nothing special. You know, their grandfather and their grandfather before already had cars. So I mean, why cars? And I mean, I see that with my son. I mean, he even doesn't. You know, I mean, we need to push him to basically make a driving license, because I mean, he's living in Paris. He doesn't need a car. Why should he do that? So I mean, I think the younger generations. I mean, I think the car is a status symbol for them. That's off. I mean, I agree. It's smartphones, or it's things like that. But so I mean, I think that's a shift, and that's obviously a cultural shift, and that's something which is happening. It's slower, certainly in certain age groups, and it's slower in maybe in countries where people have not had cars for as long as in the richer countries. But it's happening, and that's certainly something also kind of like which politicians and society can try to support by giving adequate incentives to people.
Thank you very much. And well, gentlemen, that was most enjoyable session I chaired at least in 2021. So thank you very much for joining, and I'm sure we will continue this discussion for livable cities in the future. So all the best for all of you and your wonderful cities everywhere. Thank you and goodbye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for a great session.
Yeah, thank you too.